So this, of course, is the top story that we are tracking on Fineprint tonight. On the 16th of June, back in 2009, this image that is behind me at this moment stood out as the beginning of a new grouping. It was called the BRICS, which stood for Brazil, Russia, India and China. It was a small-level meeting, hardly making any buzz around the world at the time. The 2009 declaration spoke about an international community that catered to the needs of everyone, especially that of the global south. But 14 years later, the BRICS of 2023 is a stark contrast. It seems like the group has in fact achieved a lot of the vision that it had seen for itself. And this image of the 5 nations leaders rejoicing is of course making headlines for more reason than one. Today, the media, the global south and especially the West are looking at the summit in Johannesburg. And even before this year's summit, of course, concluded, there was a lot of excitement about next year's summit that will be held in Brazil. And after much speculation, the BRICS grouping has now officially rolled out the carpet, the red carpet, for 6 new members. 3 of them are in West Asia, Saudi Arabia, Iran and the United Arab Emirates. 2 are from Africa, that is Ethiopia and Egypt. And another nation is South American nation of Argentina, who want to be a part of the BRICS grouping. Now remember, this is important geographically, it is even more important economically. Even before the expansion, the 5 BRICS nations together had made up about 32% of the global GDP. Now in terms of numbers, that's nearly about $27.64 trillion. That is the scale of the economies, the combined economies of these 5 nations. When you add the new numbers to this, the BRICS grouping will make about 26% of the global GDP.
5国领导人一致同意，邀请沙特、埃及、阿联酋、阿根廷、伊朗、埃塞俄比亚成为金砖大家庭成员。 中方对这些国家表示祝贺，对主席国南非和拉马福萨总统所做出的努力表示高度赞赏。
Now, the bloc has been pretty clear with its messaging throughout the summit that with the changing times, it is also important for the group to change. And that has been the biggest driving force for the expansion. However, none of the leaders have provided any reasoning or a criteria for the selection. 40 nations. Remember, nothing less than 40 nations have shown their interest in joining the BRICS grouping. So the question is obvious. Why only 6 of these nations have been chosen and have been invited? This is a question that needs to be decoded.
15th anniversary of BRICS, we have taken the important decision to expand it. As I had said yesterday, India has always fully supported the expansion of BRICS membership. India has always believed that the addition of new members will further strengthen BRICS as an organization, and it will give our shared efforts a new impetus.
But there's also another big question, a bit of a challenge in fact, and BRICS is yet to answer this. And this is about how to reach a consensus. Now, one of the biggest criticisms that is thrown at the bloc is that the 5 present member nations are not on the same page on several important geopolitical issues. More often than not, their interests have always been at variance with each other. So with 6 more countries coming on board, the question of course is, will consensus even be possible to tackle many of the urgent issues that are on hand? And also news that has just come in on the sidelines of the BRICS Summit. The Indian Prime Minister reportedly has had a conversation with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. And this is being said by the Indian Foreign Secretary. Both leaders apparently have agreed to have direct officials to expedite a de-escalation of the flashpoint, the crisis that is unfolding along the line of actual control. This, of course, is the latest information that has come in on the sidelines of the summit, where the Indian Prime Minister has had a meeting with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. And to decode what, in fact, all of this, of course, means, what does the BRICS expansion mean? What does it, in fact, mean for the New World Order? We're being joined by Ambassador Navdeep Singh Suri. He's joining us live on this broadcast. Ambassador Suri has, of course, been India's former ambassador to United Arab Emirates and also to Egypt. Ambassador, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us here on WION. And the question that I want to start off with is, of course, on the latest information that has come in. Now, we've been watching what was unfolding at the BRICS Summit. There was no exchange between Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese President. But the information that has just now come in is that the Indian Prime Minister, in a pull aside, reportedly has spoken with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. And apparently both leaders have agreed to have, official level talks for a de-escalation. What do you read into this?
I think the possibility of a meeting or a pull aside in Johannesburg had been under speculation for quite some time. I think it's a good thing that they've had a conversation. I don't know yet how substantive the conversation has been, but both sides clearly have an interest in de-escalating the situation on the border. India has made its position abundantly clear that we would want normal ties with China, but only on the condition that status quo ante is observed as far as the Chinese intrusions in the border are concerned. And we want to go back to where we were on April 2020. So I think if the two leaders can give a push and directions are given by the Chinese side to their armed forces, then we might start seeing a de-escalation happening on the border.
Absolutely, indeed. It's all about the Chinese intent and what they want to do at the border. And also, Ambassador, I want you to weigh in on another interesting aspect. When the joint statement, it has said that there needs to be reform at the United Nations Security Council. And the joint statement, which is also something that China, of course, has approved, has said that India should also be a part of the UNSC. But so far, the reason why, although 4 members, the permanent members of the UNSC, agree that India should be a part of the expanded UNSC, it's China which has always stuck its neck out and has opposed the inclusion of India in the UNSC. Do you think the Chinese will now agree with the other 4 permanent members of the UNSC and will be okay with India becoming a permanent member?
I would still take that with a pinch of salt, Mohammed. I think when it comes to China, we should go by actions rather than words. This is a fairly weak statement that has come out in the Johannesburg Declaration, and there's enough wiggle room over there for different interpretations to be taken. It's very loosely worded language when I saw it. So I would really say, go by the actions and not the words.
Absolutely, indeed. And also, to talk about the expansion of the BRICS grouping, there are 6 new nations that have now been invited to be a part of BRICS. We still don't know what the criteria for their inclusion will be, but the nations are Argentina, Ethiopia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. What do you make of this expansion, and how do you think that this is actually going to affect BRICS? And what is it that these new nations will in fact bring to the BRICS grouping?
Well, I think, BRICS is being recognized as an important alternate voice to the G7. And there's a degree of frustration in the global south that their concerns on reform of the multilateral financial institutions, on climate finance, on a whole host of issues. The behavior that we saw from the West during the COVID-19 pandemic, all of that coalesced to create this feeling that the concerns of the global south are not really being heard. And I think you're seeing this trend towards greater multipolarity. And as part of that, there are 40-odd countries that have expressed an interest in joining BRICS. And the fact that 6 have been chosen means that there is some degree of consensus around these 6. I'm very happy that Egypt and UAE, 2 countries where I've served as ambassador, are going to be members of the expanded BRICS grouping from January next year. I think the addition of 6 additional countries, and each one of them is a substantial regional and global player in its own right, will only add weight to the BRICS as a group. It may need a new name, of course, because the old one won't be valid any longer. But I think it certainly gives more heft and more negotiating power, more clout when it comes to raising the issues of the global south.
Absolutely, indeed. And my last quick question to you, Ambassador, is this. The criticism against BRICS is that it is dominated by the Chinese, as they are the biggest economy, and they seem to have a big say in terms of what happens within BRICS. Do you agree with that assessment that BRICS is in some ways getting more and more dominated by the Chinese agenda?
I think that's somewhat inaccurate because of the decision-making processes and the charter of BRICS. Every decision adopted by BRICS is a consensus decision. So in a sense, if we don't like something, we don't need to agree to it. And that automatically reduces the clout or dominance of any single country. Yes, there's an attempt by the Chinese to dominate or push their agenda, but that doesn't mean that they get a walkover because of the consensus-based decision-making process. Absolutely,
indeed, Ambassador. Thank you very much indeed, sir, for joining us and getting us all those insights there. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.